Hi, my name is DrJLT. In this new program, I want to talk about economic issues from a non-American centric perspective. I want to discuss the world economy and political economy. In this first episode, I want to talk about social programs funded by money printing. This is inspired by recent calls by the American left to have a range of social programs implemented by the new administration in the United States. I think this is really in the context of widening income gap and inequality across industrialized and developing worlds alike. So it is not an issue that is limited to the Americans, and this is why I think it's interesting for us to have a outside perspective on what is happening in the United States. And this episode is also based on a blog that I wrote about a couple of weeks ago on my website, DrJLT.com. And that blog post is titled, "The Road to Hell is Paved with Good Intentions. Progressive social programs can spell the end of USD hegemony." Now let me explain why I wrote this article and why I take the view that I have. Now, before I do that, let me preface it by saying that I deeply understand the plight of the working people. I myself is of the middle lower income group, so I deeply understand the difficulties a personal finances can bring, right? A weak personal finance can bring. And I deeply understand in the time period of pandemic, we have seen tremendous wealth growth among the elites who have seen their asset prices just double, triple, quadruple. Well, wage earners have the short end of the stick, so to speak. But why is it that I think printing money is not a solution? And why I think, some countries with better finances may be able to fund more social programs. The United States is perhaps uniquely in danger if it were to print money and fund these programs. So first I want to address one issue, which is Medicare for all, which has been talked a lot at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. There was a movement which is named Force the Vote. They basically want to force a floor vote in the American Congress for a single payer healthcare system to be implemented in the United States. That I think is something that is potentially a great idea. It is very different. We must be able to differentiate Medicare for all from a lot of the other social programs. And the difference is that some programs that address inequality do it by saving money, while other programs do it by let's not say wasting, by spending money. Medicare for all is, in especially the context of the United States, is a money-saving program. The United States government spends more per capita than every other industrialized nation with single-player healthcare systems. They spend more, but they not only have worse healthcare results, but also they don't have coverage. Because on top of the tremendous amount of money that is being spent by the American taxpayer, basically, there's each taxpayer or each individual need to purchase private healthcare unless they are above the age of, I think now it's 65, from where they will qualify for Medicare for I mean Medicare, which is funded by the government. The reason that they have this system is very obvious to anyone who is honest or who has paid a little bit of attention. And the reason is that the American political system is corrupt, that money interests from the pharmaceutical companies, from the health insurance companies, and even from a lot of the educational institutions, medical schools, and also banks who issue these predatory loans to medical students. Everything, everywhere, this is a system that is very complex, that have vested interests in wasteful healthcare spending. I'm not saying that it is easy to address this problem. I'm not saying that this can be easily fixed, and I question whether it can at all be solved. But a fact is that it is wasteful, and if a new system, if a single-payer system replaces the current complex and complex system, just that is rich with that has enriched a lot of politicians, a lot of corruption, and of course a lot of shareholders of those big pharmaceutical and health insurance companies. If this system is abolished, if a new single-payer system replaces it, they will be able to save money, and by saving money, they will be able to cut down the deficit, and actually, it will be a boost in the United States dollar. The dollar will be stronger, and it will be able to be more convincingly act as the world's reserve currency. On the other hand, if we want to implement social programs such as universal basic income, basically otherwise known as UBI, which has been proposed, I think a lot of politicians at different points in time have talked about it, but it became popular during the election that has just ended, when the candidate Andrew Yang talked a lot about UBI, giving people a universal basic income so that they can prosper. And I think this is actually such a well-intentioned idea. I think perhaps among the best. But at the same time, I think, I'm not entirely sure if Andrew Yang is prefacing it with this, but I think some libertarians once also talked about UBI. But when they were talking about it, they were saying also abolishing a lot of the other social programs, because they understand one thing, which is that if someone works in production, participates in the economy, and produces goods and services and creates value, then value is added to the economy, and this is returned to that person in the form of a payment and currency, a US dollar. But if money is just simply created without any wealth creation, then this currency basically is only being diluted. The purchasing power of this money is simply being diluted. That's simply what it is. It's dilution, and another word for it is inflation. It is a tax on all the people who hold the currency, and that's basically what it is. And this is, I think, self-defeating, because the moment you introduce universal basic income, unless you also ensure that everyone must be employed and must participate in the economy, what happens is that a lot of people will not be participating in the economy. And when they don't participate in the economy, what happens is that the money that they received is simply a dilution of some other money. And everyone who has participated in the economy may be worse off. And I think uniquely, this UBI is self-defeating, because, well, its intention is to help people who are in need, people who have low income or no income. It is low income people that are hurt the most, not necessarily the no income people, because people who really have no income, there is actually of course they have a net gain. But for low income people, when you every month print new money to pay everyone, the wage of low income people is simply going to shrink in their purchasing power. And for low income people who have a tiny bit of savings, the purchasing power of their savings will be taxed all the time. At the same time, meanwhile, rich people, they have their wealth primarily in assets. Doesn't matter which one. You talk about Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. They have most of their wealth in different properties, real estates, farmlands, a lot of stocks in their companies. They don't have a lot of savings in their bank account. They optimize their they optimize their finances so that they don't have savings in their bank account. And in doing so, basically, they are not going to be taxed, proportionately. They are not going to be taxed by inflation as badly as people who have just 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 in their bank accounts. Those people will see their purchasing power, the purchasing power of their $50,000, $100,000 shrink every month by month through inflation. Whereas rich people will see, in the meantime, their assets increase in value, because when there's a lot of inflation, the asset prices actually are the first to be beat up. And in this context, we will see that the rich will indeed get richer, the poor will stay poor, and that is what UBI will provide. It is not solving any of the problems. The only solution, in my judgment, of addressing the income, the wealth gap, the gap in inequality, is to close the loopholes and ensure that everyone plays by the same rules, same set of rules, not by money printing. Money printing is a quick way to get a very short-term sugar high, but in the midterm is going to damage the poor. And I would argue that in the long term will lead to the demise of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, which perhaps is a good thing. One last thing I want to address, and it is something that I mentioned, or I touched on in this blog post, which is money printing for Wall Street and for war. Indeed, we have seen tremendous amount of money being created by the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. This is something that I will talk about separately in, I think, the next episode. But here I want to briefly mention how to draw the difference between money printing for war and Wall Street and money printing for social programs. The difference is this. When we print money for social programs, people who like UBI or a higher minimum wage, funded by money printing. If the higher minimum wage is funded by, if these social programs are funded by increasing taxes, that's one thing. We can talk about that another time. Tax has its own malice in that it's also distorting a lot of the signals in the economy. But just by money printing is perhaps one of the worst ways in approaching this. Printing money, when we print money for and give it to the poor would just basically go out and spend that money because they have their demand, their desire to spend, their purchasing will have long been suppressed. And now when you give them some money, they are going to spend it. And this will basically significantly increase in the short term, in the immediate term, the demand of goods on the market. And since supply is not increased, because supply of goods and services comes from production. And production is not something that you can print out of thin air with the Federal Reserve or whatever the central bank, or whichever central bank. So you will have more or less the same supply and increasing demand. What happens is that price will come up, and this will basically reflect in the inflation in consumer prices. On the other hand, money printing for war and for Wall Street is slightly different in that money printing for war basically there's a lot of money that's been spent, but the wealth are concentrated in the few wealthy interest groups. And these wealthy interest groups are simply going to beat up the asset prices of some luxury goods, as we have seen luxury properties, luxury art, luxury automobiles, planes, yachts, etc. have gone up dramatically in price. But they are not going to consume so much in consumer electronics, not so much in basic consumer goods, food, etc. And so the effect is felt less in the real economy for the working people, and the same is money printing for Wall Street. The banks get rich, but the few bankers, they are not going to eat half of what a nation does, so they are going to only beat up the price in luxury real estate, yachts, planes, private jets, etc., but not common goods that most average people buy. And so that is why, even though this is really unfair, those people have gotten exceptionally rich especially in the last decade and change, thanks to quantitative easing, which if anyone should be enraged on anything, it should be this. I think this is the number one creator of inequality in all countries where QE has been implemented. But anyway, by the same time, if we really do a QE for the people and print money and give it to the people, it's going to be even worse for the people. Because after all, you cannot create wealth out of thin air. You can only dilute wealth through inflation out of thin air. And that is money printing, and that is QE. And so, well, this is this episode. Thank you very much if you have made this far. And if you want to know more about this post and some of my other ideas, I encourage you to basically follow me. And you can also find my website at DrJLT.com. I have a small website that I've been building with some AI stuff, which is quite interesting. It's about new products, and it's called Newfiliac, NEOFILIAC, newfiliac.com. So I encourage you to check that one out as well. Thank you very much for listening, and I wish you a great day.